Hey folks, welcome in. This is Chris with Alpenglow Digital, and in today's video we are going to take a look at SharePoint list views. This is hopefully a good introduction for folks that are using lists for the first time. Maybe want to customize the column and some of the formatting for each column in their list to make things a little bit more visually appealing. So we're going to take this kind of boring default SharePoint list and we're going to do a few things to enhance it. We're going to add some columns that SharePoint gives us right out of the box, like the ID and the created timestamp for each item. We're also going to add some conditional formatting to the status and the severity columns. In the severity column, you'll notice that a few of them even have icons next to them. Thankfully, these days, all that can be accomplished with just a few clicks. We are also going to omit some of the fields from this particular view that we don't think need to be visible, kind of at a dashboard level. So without further ado, let's go. Hey folks, welcome into SharePoint. Before we jump into our list and creating and customizing our view of that list, I just wanted to throw out a brief reminder if you're brand new to SharePoint and looking to create a list for the first time. You can do so by visiting your SharePoint site, going into Site Contents, clicking the New button, and from here you can add a bunch of new elements to your site. Oftentimes you'll be creating new pages or document libraries, and you can also create a new list from here. The list that we will start with in this video is just a blank list, which means it does not come with any additional fields beyond the default SharePoint ones. It also doesn't come with any sort of conditional formatting, which we will add ourselves here in a bit. I do think that the templates are great for the most part. Not only do they come with fields, but they also come with some conditional logic. So a lot of them, like an issue tracker, might have like a severity level or a status and things like that that are already color coded based on the value. And I think that's really great. Again, we're going to cover that in this video, but if you do want something out of the box that looks nice and pretty, one of these use cases might work for your particular scenario. So give them a shot. Here's our SharePoint list. SharePoint gave us title right out of the box, and then I've gone ahead and added these 6 or so fields. There are a bunch of SharePoint fields that you'll get by default. We've covered those in a couple other videos. Things like timestamps for when something was created or modified. And then there are a couple fields called created by or modified by that tell you the individual that created or modified them. You also will have a SharePoint list ID for each of your list items. Starts at 1 and goes up. And those are not visible in your default view, which is called all items, which you will get as soon as your SharePoint list is created. There are a couple ways that you can create a new view. So if you were here, say we're in our all items default view, and you wanted the category to be filtered to, say, folks that have access issues. So you apply that, and then you'll see this little asterisk next to your view, which means that you've augmented it from whatever it was defaulted to. And so now, if I were to click on all items, I can then save this view as. So maybe I want to save this view as access request view or something like that. And then make it public would mean that other folks on your SharePoint site that have access to this list could also see this view. So let's give that a shot. We're going to save it. And now you see that it renamed our view. We still have our all items, and that's right here. And then it created us a new tab for what we called access requests. So it's a nice, easy way to do it. Another approach, I'm actually going to get rid of this guy just so it doesn't clog too much room. You can add a view up here. It'll do the same thing where it asks you to name it, and then you can choose kind of how it displays. If you do a lot of things with events, the calendar view is awesome. So are these. So give those a shot. What I'm actually going to do is come up to list settings for a SharePoint list. This is where you see all your columns. And then at the bottom, you will see all of your views. So here's our all items one, which you got by default. And I'm going to create a brand new view. Firstly, it'll ask you to select the view type. You will notice that some of these options look similar. There's a calendar view, for example, and a standard view, but they are a little bit different from the options that you get if you come up here and click add view, where you see stuff like a gallery and a board. And back up here, I think we had like a Gantt chart view and things like that. SharePoint is in an interesting spot because it's it feels like it's stuck between kind of classic SharePoint and modern SharePoint. So on that other screen, I think you're actually using a product called Microsoft Lists, which is kind of built on top of SharePoint and is a way to kind of enhance your list experience. For the purpose of this video, we are just going to stick to a standard view of our SharePoint list. We're going to sort some columns, remove some columns from the view, and add a little bit of conditional formatting. The first thing we want to do is give our view a name. So the use case I'm thinking here is that I have a help desk ticketing system, which is what our SharePoint list is going to act as kind of the database for, if you will. And I want the folks that are processing those tickets to easily be able to see when something was created and maybe who it's assigned to or the severity level. So I'm going to call this particular view the processor view. And so I'm expecting those that are processing tickets to use this view. And I'm also going to make it the default view. So instead of all items, which was the only view we had before and therefore the default view, I'd like this new view to be the default view. I'd also like to ensure that it's public so that all of our processors can see it. Once we get down into the columns section, you will see all of the columns on your SharePoint list. You will notice that this list is a lot longer than just columns that you have created. This is because, as mentioned before, SharePoint gives you a lot of columns out of the box. Things like the timestamps we talked about for created, the SharePoint list ID. There are a lot of things that you probably just won't use, but the SharePoint still tracks in the background, like version, for example. And so the first thing that I'm going to do is check all of the boxes for the fields that I'd like in my view. And then I'm going to come over here on the right and I'm going to order them. So when I'm thinking about what my processing team might need, helpful to know the title. I don't think they necessarily need to know a description, kind of at the dashboard level. Severity, I think, makes sense. Assigned to, category, status is very helpful. And I don't think admin notes is necessary. There are a couple things that I do want to add that weren't previously checked. I do think it would be nice to know when a ticket is created. And I think it would be nice to easily see the ID for that ticket. So I'm imagining if you are having a conversation with a colleague or the end user, and you can say, hey, I'm on ID 18. It's very easy to go in the list and see what ID each SharePoint list item has. So I have all of these selected. Looks like I've got 7 of them. And now I want to think about the position from left to right. So it has title first. But what I would like to have first is, I think, the SharePoint ID. I want that to be in the very first column. So you'll notice that when you select 1, that bumps it up into the first position, and then everything else gets bumped down. So now title is 2. And so next to ID, I'd like to have the created date and time. And then that bumps that down to 3. And so now maybe this makes sense. So from left to right, I'm going to have ID, a created timestamp, the title, maybe, severity might be fine. Again, you'll notice that this is at 4 description, but since description is not checked, it's just going to jump from 3 to 5, which is the next thing I have checked with severity. Assigned to, category, and status. I actually do want status up there quite a bit. So maybe I will do this as 3. Okay. ID, created, status, title, severity, assigned to, and category. Once you've selected all your fields, you do have the option to sort your view by default or filter it by default. In our case, I would like it to be sorted by default. I'm going to use the created field. And I want the most recently created entries to be at the top. So that's actually going to be the descending order. And you can also do kind of complex sorting if you'd like. First sort by created. If those dates are equal, you could sort by something else. But we're not going to worry about that for now. We're just going to have created. We're also not going to pre-filter this. I think this is very helpful if you are creating like a personal view for yourself and you wanted to say, maybe I'm Harold, and you wanted to pre-filter this to assigned to equals Harold so you can quickly see your own tickets. That's a way to do that. There's also a lot of other information here in your view that I'm not worried about. So I'm going to come down here to the bottom and click OK to save. Once your view is saved, you'll be taken back to your SharePoint list. And because we asked SharePoint to consider this our new default view, that is exactly what you'll see on this list. So here's our all items view on this tab if we want to go back to that. Here's our new processing view. What's nice is if you decided maybe I want assigned to be over here instead, you could go back to the list settings and then go to the view settings and change the ordering, or you can just kind of drag and drop these headers and you will notice that the view is saved. You aren't prompted to save your view, where if you went and say wanted to filter this by network, you would see this little asterisk and it would ask you like, hey, do you want to save this current version of the view? In our case, let's clear out filters. You won't see that prompt when you are just switching around columns. I'm not sure exactly why that is, but it's just doing this, saving your settings on the back end. So next time you come, you will see your columns in the order in which you left them. Now that we have our content looking good, our list is still visually very boring. And so let's jump into the exciting part, I think, which is the formatting part. In this case, it's just going to be design formatting. It's not going to be anything like columns or sortings or things like that. That's all done through list settings. But if you come up here and click your view, you can come down here to format current view, and you will see a couple options. There are kind of two big buckets for formatting. One is kind of at the row level, and the second is at the individual column level. So you will see two tabs pop up, format view and format columns. Format view is going to be your rows. You can do simple things like adding alternating rows. You could come in here and style these any way you want to. That's a terrible option. I think this is helpful if you're breaking up big chunks of data and the colors don't need to correspond to any sort of value. It's just a way to kind of visually help folks see the list a little bit better. You could also do conditional formatting. And so when you do conditional formatting, it allows you to define a rule. So say I want my status, if it is equal to resolved, I would like that row to be like a green. So now you can easily see which items are resolved. Using this approach can make it really easy to see which items fall into certain buckets. But as you can imagine, if you had a number of rules and eventually every row was a different color, visually it becomes very overwhelming. So we are actually not going to apply any of these rules. And instead, we're going to look at column rules, column conditional formatting rules. And there are a couple ways you can do this. One, you can come back up here, go to Format Current View, and our second tab is Format Columns. Alternatively, if you go to the actual column you care about, go to Column Settings, go to Format Column, you will be taken to the same spot. So this is our status column, and here are the options for formatting. What's nice is SharePoint understands what data type you're using. So if you went to the created column, this one, which is a timestamp, you will see some different options for, in this case, dates. And so if we click this, for example, you can see that it turned everything green, not super helpful. And the reason it did that is because the default style was that if it was created today, it's going to be green. If it's after today, it'll be red, and so forth. I don't find that all that useful for the use cases we've outlined in our office. You could also use conditional formatting where you're specifying the values, and that would allow you to say, hey, I want the date for whatever reason to be highlighted if the status is equal to in progress, for example, and you could change things that way. Again, I don't find that particularly useful. What we do oftentimes use is formatting for columns that we really care about, which in the context of a help desk is probably things like severity and status. So let's take a look at updating our status column. For choice fields like the status column, you'll see a couple different options. These largely differ just formatting wise. The logic kind of for the rules behind them are very similar. So if we were to select background colors, you will see that by default, SharePoint adds a different color to each of the values. So all of the in progress ones are green, on hold's kind of this golden color. And if you wanted to come in here, you could augment things this way. Maybe these, I don't like these two as red. Maybe I don't want a dark blue if it's closed. You could do something like that. What I like about this is that it really easily color codes everything. It's not as much color as the entire row, but I still think that even these blocks are a little bit too much. So what I'm going to do is come back to our second option, which is choice pills. And this really nicely styles things so that it doesn't take up the entire block. Color coding still exists, and it's just not quite as visually overwhelming, I think. You can also come in here and edit styles. And you, for whatever reason, in the choice pills option, you do have even further options. One, you could specify a lot more kind of default colors, but you also can come down here to more styles and add things like icons, which I think is really cool. So maybe if something is closed, then we put an X by it, and you can see this little X icon here. I think that's really cool. We'll pop over to severity maybe and add those sorts of icons. But it is cool that you can easily do this Previously, you had to know how to kind of finagle the JSON for your SharePoint list, and that was a little overwhelming. But now you can pick the exact text color you want, the exact fill color you want. You can even add things like have it be bold if it's maybe closed or new. And you just have a lot more flexibility, which is just great to see in SharePoint. All right, the third and final option is going to be conditional formatting, which allows you to write your own rules. So by default, it was previously just looking at the status value and it said, all right, we're going to assign some colors to it. Here you can do the same thing. So if you did want to say, I want the status to be equal to, maybe it's resolved, and maybe I want these to be green. But then you can also make things a little bit more complex. So you could add another condition. So maybe if this is resolved and it was like a network issue, let's go down here, network, maybe I want this to be like blue, for example. And this could be a way that if you had a lot of different views and you want them formatted a specific way, maybe somebody just cared about resolved network issues and they wanted to maybe do like a post-mortem and go check out what happened. This would be a great way for them to really easily be able to see which items were part of these two conditions. And again, you can keep going and make things a little bit more complex if you wanted. So for now, I'm just going to do choice pills here, and then let's go take a look at our severity column too. Since we have the idea to quickly format things and add icons, I thought it'd be fun to do that for the severity column. So I'm going to do choice pills again, edit styling. I want severity low. I think green's good. I do want maybe like a down arrow, so it's kind of low priority. And save that. Maybe medium doesn't have anything. Maybe high gets like an up arrow. We'll save that. And then if something is critical, I need it to look a little bit different. Maybe it's like a dark red. And then I also want it to be maybe this warning message. So what I think is nice is, one, that's just a few clicks to kind of make this happen. The conditional formatting is nice and easy to apply. And it also, again, in my case, I was able to change the color so that this really sticks out. So that if you come into the dashboard and you see you've got 5 requests overnight, this one is critical. It's very easy to know, hey, maybe I should prioritize that and jump in there. You could, of course, also make a different view that only showed critical requests. Or if you wanted to get super fancy, you could tie this into like Power Automate somehow. And when any request was received, if it was critical, maybe it sends your emergency contact like an email that says, hey, we just got a new critical submission. Can you take a look ASAP? Alrighty, folks, that does it for a quick overview of how to create your own SharePoint list view. This has become a much more enjoyable experience in recent years as SharePoint has made a lot of improvements to the ease in which you can style your lists, do things like add conditional formatting, add icons. No longer do you have this giant JSON object that you have to go into and tweak things. You can now just do it all through this lovely UI with just a few clicks. So I hope that what we outlined in this video has some sort of applicability to your own use case, and I hope you have found it useful. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.